You ever bought a cheap orbital shaker for your incubator, only to find it rattling loose the first time you try to set a temperature or the motor dies after a week of nonstop mixing? I've seen that happen a lot, especially with budget models that promise lab-grade performance, but can't survive the humid, 37°C environment of a CO chamber. That regret is what makes me pause before hitting Add to Cart on any new piece of equipment. In today's review, I'm going to see whether the benchmark scientific BT4000 Orbi shaker actually feels like a smarter buy or just another gamble. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the problem most of us are trying to solve. You have a CO incubator, you need to keep your cell cultures or microbial broths evenly suspended, and you also need to be able to adjust speed, orbit, and run time without opening the chamber and risking temperature spikes. The stakes are high. A failed shake can ruin days of work, and a device that can't handle the humidity will need constant replacement, adding hidden costs. That's why the market is littered with low-cost shakers that either aren't sealed enough for the incubator or lack a remote control, forcing you to reach in and disturb the environment. The BT4000 is marketed specifically for those extreme environments. Its biggest selling point is the remote controller that lets you tweak the orbit speed from outside the incubator. In practice, that means you can keep the incubator door closed, maintain a stable 5% CO level, and still change parameters on the fly. I tested that by setting up a 250 milliliters flask of yeast culture, placing it on the rubber mat, and stepping back to a bench outside the chamber. The remote responded instantly, and I could see the speed readout change on the small LCD without any lag. That quick feedback loop is a real time saver when you're troubleshooting a growth curve or trying to optimize oxygen transfer. The orbit itself is a 19 millimeters horizontal circle. That size is a sweet spot for most standard flasks. It creates enough shear to keep cells in suspension without shearing them apart. During a 48-hour experiment, I noticed the culture stayed uniformly cloudy, which is exactly what you want for reproducibility. If you've ever used a shaker with a larger orbit, you might have seen sloshing that creates dead zones at the bottom of the flask. The BT4000's tighter path avoids that issue. It also means the device fits comfortably on the rubber mat that comes with it, which is designed to absorb vibration and prevent the shaker from moving around on the incubator shelf. Now, who should actually consider buying this? If you run a small to medium research lab, a biotech startup, or a teaching lab where you need a reliable shaker that can sit inside a CO incubator for weeks at a time, the BT4000 checks a lot of boxes. Its remote operation eliminates the need for an extra person to stand at the incubator door, which is a subtle productivity boost. The Magic Clamp accessory system makes swapping out flasks fast. You just slide the clamp off one flask and onto the next without tools. That's a big help when you have to change media or scale up from 100 milliliters to 500 milliliters bottles during a single run. On the flip side, if you're only shaking samples at room temperature, or you have a very limited budget and your incubator already has a built-in shaker platform, you probably don't need the extra remote or the sealed housing. The BT4000's 115V power requirement also means you'll need a standard outlet, which can be a limitation if your incubator is in a cramped space with only a single plug. In that scenario, a simpler benchtop shaker could do the job for a fraction of the price. Let's get into the practical strengths. First, the remote controller is not just a novelty. It's built solidly, with tactile buttons that still work after weeks of exposure to the incubator's humidity. The LCD display shows speed, direction, and run time clearly, so you don't have to guess whether you're at 200 revolutions per minute or 250 revolutions per minute. Second, the rubber mat does its job. During a 12-hour continuous run, the shaker stayed put, and I didn't notice any wobble that could have thrown off the culture. Third, the instant exchange clamps saved me about 5 minutes each time I swapped a flask during a multi-step protocol, which adds up when you're running several cultures in parallel. No product is perfect, and there are a couple of trade-offs to be aware of. The BT4000's orbit is fixed at 19 millimeters. You can't adjust the radius, which some high-throughput labs might want for different flask geometries. Also, the motor is designed for durability in humid conditions, but that means it's a little louder than the ultra-quiet bench models you find on the market. In a shared lab space, you'll hear it, although the sound isn't deafening. It's more of a steady whir that you can tune out after a few minutes. Finally, the price point sits